Welcome to another episode of Dealmaker Nation. Guys, tonight we have one of the biggest speakers we've ever had on the show. The show just keeps on getting bigger and better every single week. We have the one and only Eric Brewer. Guys, if you haven't heard about Eric, I don't know if you've been on a rock or what, but he's absolutely killing it in Pennsylvania. He's done over 375 investor deals just in the last year and also 400 conventional retail sales as well. So he's an absolute beast. He's got so much experience, and we're going to be diving into all sorts of things tonight. We'll talk about his background, how he got into real estate investing, what he was doing before that, what his first few deals looked like. And then one of the things that I think is going to be a really, really big treat on the show is there was a key innovation that he made in his business, I believe a couple of years ago, that I think nearly doubled the amount of deals he was doing per year. So if you're a real estate investor, you want to make sure to stay tuned and listen for that, because that's going to be absolutely incredible. Also, guys, make sure you're putting in your questions live, because this is your one chance to learn from one of the best in the business. So we will be coming to you live. Eric is going to be joining us in about 2 seconds right after this. What is up, Eric?
What's up, guys?
What's going on?
My co-host, Josh Cohen, also joined the show live tonight. What's up, guys? Eric, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This I just listened to your Real Estate Disruptors podcast, and as soon as I listened to it, I got 15, 20 different companies that I work with across the industry. I was literally on my phone texting it to like every business. I was like, there's so many gold nuggets in this interview. So I'm hoping we can jump into some of those tonight, and you can share them with some of our audience. But before we do that, I want to hear your story. What were you doing before real estate? Tell us a little bit about that and how you ended up getting into the real estate space.
Yeah, so I actually got started professionally in the car business. Started off, replied to a newspaper ad and thought cars were always pretty cool, and if I could work around them, wouldn't be such a bad gig. So I went in, got hired for a job really parking cars. It was called a porter. If you've ever worked at a car dealership, I was the porter for a new Mercedes and a new Toyota dealership. After working there for a couple months, someone took notice that I was doing a pretty good job parking cars, I guess, and thought that I might be a good candidate for one of their assistant service managers, which meant I parked cars and helped out with some other stuff now too. And did that job for about 2 years. And I was also, I worked from like 7 to 5 in the service department. And then at 5, I would go and wash cars in the detail department for the sales team. And someone took notice that I was working 75, 85 hours a week. And the owner of the dealership at the time, Albert Deal, had brought it to somebody's attention and said, this guy's a hard worker. Why don't you look for another place to put him? Then I ended up being a service manager, then eventually moved on to sales and then sales management, and worked my way up to some of the higher levels in sales management at a pretty big new Toyota dealer here in town. And after about 8 years of doing that, I was soon to be a father, and imagined not working 80 hours a week anymore, 6 days a week, and made a decision to get out of the car business with no idea of what I was going to do next. I was smart enough with my money and did pretty well for myself while working in the car business. I just decided I was going to take a couple months off and do some soul searching, and decided real estate would be a good fit for me after a couple months of vacation. and got into the mortgage business because I thought that was the right place to start if I was going to learn real estate based on my car experience. And while I was working in mortgages, my old owner of the dealership called me and said that he thought he wanted to invest in real estate and wanted to work with me. We had lunch the next day, decided to open a business, and started flipping houses in 2005.
Wow.
Wow.
So started off in mortgages, and what was it about mortgages that you found interesting? A lot of people will come in, they'll be a real estate agent, or maybe if they're brave, they'll go directly into flipping. What was it about the mortgage industry that you found interesting?
Nothing. I did it because I thought I had to. One of the things that made us better at selling cars where I came from was our understanding of financing, our relationship with different lenders. So we would have people often come in and want to buy a car and said they'd been turned down by other dealerships, and we had 15 different banking relationships. And one of those 15 might be able to offer those folks a loan. So we quite simply sold more cars because we put a bigger emphasis and a commitment to understanding the different, financing that was out there for folks that were looking to buy a car, and then, put in the time and energy to build those relationships with those lenders. So when I got into real estate, I just thought that would be the best place to start, but nothing about it was interesting or fun for me. It was just a necessary evil. And even today, I would tell you that, one of the biggest things that I think that helps us be successful is our understanding of not only the finances that we need to do our business, but being able to point people in the right direction when it comes to buying one of our homes, whether it's a single family home that they want to live in, or a 4-unit that they're buying from us, or a package of 60 single family homes. Each of those have very different finance or ideal financing structures to them. And then certainly different lenders are better at different loans. So that's the only reason I got into finance, because I thought it would be a great place to learn real estate.
Awesome. And now tell us how you got then from the mortgage business into actual investing. Can you tell us about your first deal and what kind of motivated you to branch out into doing deals yourself?
Yeah. So, we basically decided we were going to flip houses. My partner, who lived in Maryland at the time, heard a radio station commercial for a brick and mortar investing school. It's called Investors United. It's in Baltimore County. I'm pretty sure they're still open. So they've been around for 25 years plus. And they basically train. It was a 1-year curriculum. They train you how to lead generate. Back then people actually went to the courthouse to pull different lists and then would, handwrite mailers, if you can imagine, what that might be like. Yeah. So then they would teach you that. They would teach you how to, what they called contract engineering, things like due diligence periods and how to write an assignment and how to dispo. They taught you how to basically be a wholesaler. So we signed up for that school. It was a 1-year curriculum. We went for 2 months and kind of looked at each other and were like, I think we can do this. We don't need to be here. So, at that point we had already learned about lead generation and contract engineering. And then when they started getting into how to negotiate and how to sell, I think we felt that we had accumulated enough knowledge after being in the car business for a decade that we could skip the negotiating phase. So we went back and put up some billboards and started making offers on bank-owned properties and bought a house. That was the beginning of it. And then once we bought one, we made a little money and had fun doing it, wanted to do more, and just started making more offers, buying more homes, rehabbing more houses. Stumbled across what ended up being like a small development deal. We bought a 3-bedroom brick Cape Cod on Memory Lane Extended. I still remember what road it was. It was Memory Lane Extended. And turns out it was zoned highway commercial. So as we did some due diligence, we found out that if you get to 1 acre of ground and property that was zoned highway commercial, that it could be worth a lot of money. So for 3 or 4 months, my partner worked on buying the surrounding properties that it got us over 1 acre. And then we ended up selling it off to, of all people, a car dealership.
Came full circle.
Yeah, it was big enough for them to be able to put a small, back then it would have been a new car Suzuki dealer. Back in 2005, Suzukis were still being sold in the U.S.
Yeah.
So that was like our first group of deals. And then we just, 2006, 2007, the real estate market's just absolutely nuts.
Right.
We were able to buy stuff on the MLS, and we did a little bit of some billboards and stuff. Would pick up an occasional deal, and did renovations to it, and then listed it with a real estate agent. And first full year, we did 70 deals, and then I think every year after that, we've been over 200. So that's how I got started.
So Eric, thanks for coming on the show tonight. I mean, 375 deals a year is no joke. So could you let our audience know, I mean, you're out in York, Pennsylvania, which a lot of guys in DC are familiar with that region. Central PA is sort of booming right now for investment. There's a lot of cheap assets that you can buy. What does the business look like today? Can you sort of break it down? Like, out of 375 deals a year, what exactly do you do?
Yeah, so about, without getting the exact numbers, I don't have them here in front of me, but more than half of our business is wholesale. Probably 30% of our business, maybe a little bit less, is turnkey. We buy, renovate, rent, and then resell and manage on behalf of investors all across the country.
Oh, wow.
And then we do a tremendous amount of what most people would know as wholesale business. But I think you guys had caught it on another show that I was on. There's a process or an exit strategy and an acquisition strategy that we've kind of developed here called novations. So we do about 50 or 60 of those a year as well. So the combination, it's predominantly wholesale. The other large, second would be turnkeys. And then the rest of our business is novations.
Now, your novation agreements, I thought were absolutely brilliant. That was one of the key insights from the Real Estate Disruptors podcast I first heard you on. Absolutely brilliant. Can you explain to our audience what a novation agreement is, and also maybe tell us a little bit of the story about how you ended up kind of discovering those? Years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So, bottom line is a novation is that I always start by explaining it one of two ways. One is it is wholesaling. It's a wholesale style transaction to a retail buyer. So the average novation deal for us is one where we've made an offer, let's say, of $70,000 as a wholesale offer. We plan to, if we can, negotiate a contract at $70,000, make the deal with the seller, and then wholesale that property for 85, 88, 90, 95, whatever wholesale value would be in today's market. Oftentimes, as you guys know, sellers don't accept those offers. They're looking for more money. What we find is with novations, the ideal property is a property that typically is in very good condition. It's a property that would sell for anywhere for 25 to 35% over and above the least amount that a seller would take. So in this example, let's say that I wanted to offer 70, I might go to 75, but the seller wants 100, and whether I fix and flip that, I rent it, those numbers just don't work. I think I'd said when I was on Steve's show, and we always talk about what's wholesale, what's renovation, what's after repaired value. Too often as investors, we don't pay attention to what's it worth now.
Right.
What would it sell in as is condition, right? Yeah. And when you look at the amount of inventory that's sold in the open market, a very small percentage of it, 10% at most, let's say, is renovated investor inventory, right? It's mostly homeowners that lived in the house. Maybe they did some renovations. Maybe they didn't. Maybe their house is trashed. Maybe it's the nicest one ever. But it's not an investor renovated property. So we look at all these ARVs and all this stuff, but we're overlooking the greater portion of the inventory that gets sold out there, and it's properties that are in decent condition but aren't renovated. So in that example, we're buying homes like that and paying up to $100,000, $110,000 because they have an as-is value of $130,000 to $140,000. And with the novation strategy, I'm not taking title to the property. I'm not really doing many, if any, repairs. And I've eliminated, depending on how your financing is set up, all the associated lending costs, transfer tax, title insurance. Normally, to buy and sell a property, if you did nothing to it, you're going to spend between $6,000 and $10,000 on settlement charges. So by using the novation strategy, bottom line is it allows you to have a wholesale style transaction by selling to a retail buyer at a retail price.
Wow, it's brilliant. I think the reason why this is such a game changer for businesses is, you know, I always tell investors of companies, this whole business is all about return on ad spend and cash conversion cycle, right? So you generate 100 leads. Most teams across the country will close 3 out of 100 3 out of 100 leads. So it's going to take them 33. The top teams will close 1 in 10. But if you're hitting all the leads with the same hammer, that percentage is very small. You know, you generate 100 leads, 97 of them you're going to throw in the trash. A lot of leads come in and it's kind of like, oh, sorry, your property is not bad enough for me to buy, you know, because the margins aren't there for a cash investor. But with this novation agreement, those deals that you normally pass on, now you can capture those, right?
Yeah.
So Eric, can you talk us sort of through the mechanics of that? So like, I mean, a lot of our viewers understand a traditional wholesale deal. You put it under contract, you have a sales contract, you have an assignment contract, so you have A to B and B to C. A wholesale, you close on it and then you sell it, you take title of the property. How does the novation agreement, what are the mechanics of that?
It goes A to C, it eliminates the B. So if you look up the technical terminology of novation, it basically means replacement. So the novation strategy essentially extinguishes your agreement with the seller under very specific terms. Those terms say, I'm going to, because you can't be in 2 contracts at one time, right? Like Steve and Mary Smith could not agree to sell me their house for $70,000 or $100,000 and then go out and sell it to somebody else for $130,000. They can't do that.
Right.
So what happens is once I have the controlling interest in the property, we have equitable title, we use our normal acquisition contract that most people are already using. And most people, particularly wholesalers, have wholesale language in there, right? I have the ability to assign it, blah, blah, blah. This is a very similar language. It's just if you replace that one word assignment with novation, that's what our contract looks like. We actually have both. So I can assign it or novate it. So if once I get the property under contract for $100,000, and I've explained now at this point that, Steve, I can't pay 70. Would you consider being a little bit flexible on the terms of this agreement if it meant that I could get you a higher price? Steve normally says yes. We then arrive at a value of $100,000 in exchange. Steve's going to give me the ability to show it with reasonable access. Steve's going to understand that I'm going to sell it for a small but reasonable profit. But in exchange, he has an as-is cash arrangement with me. Okay, so our acquisition contract looks probably identical to what everybody else is using, right? So, but the novation happens when I market the property, I find a buyer for $135,000. That person's, let's say, using FHA financing, VA financing, conventional financing. Normally, those lending institutions or even a conventional lender will not allow an assignment fee on a HUD. Okay, so that's where the novation process comes into play. We release the seller from our contract in exchange for any proceeds or responsibility or liability over and above the terms of our original agreement at 100. So I had an as-is deal for 100 with Steve. I sold it to Bob for 135. The 135 requires inspections and mortgage contingencies and appraisal contingencies. So my novation agreement, not a legally binding real estate contract, I'm releasing our original contract and it says, you know what, Steve, I'll allow you to be out of that contract. You can sell it to the other guy, and in exchange, the difference between 100 and 135 comes to me. And then all this other little work that they're asking for, I'm going to go ahead and take care of that. The realtor commissions, the appraisal contingencies, and all that other crap. So that's what makes it a wholesale style transaction is you don't have to pay for the property. You don't take title. You're not even on the chain of title, right? Because I've released that contract. And then, by the way, the novation agreement says if that other contract is terminated, we revert back to our original contract, right? So just a step aside to allow them to pass title directly from A to C and for me to get basically a novation fee. A release fee is what I've seen it sometimes classified for. And some title companies that do put it on the HUD, they'll call it a release fee. So basically someone paid me to let them out of that contract. So I'm essentially letting them out of a contract to sell it to someone else for more money in exchange for the difference between the two values.
That's brilliant. Josh Hines, hey, what's up, Josh? Josh says, beautiful strategy. I agree. I had never, to be honest, heard of Novation before I heard about it from you. Now, the real key here is it's helping you monetize more of the leads that you would have normally thrown in the trash. Now, what I was really surprised by is just how big of an impact it can make on your numbers. Can you share with us how implementing these changed your numbers? What kind of increase in deal flow were you able to deliver in your business after implementing
So we
this?
saw real two impacts. One is you can make deals that you weren't making before, right? So that instance that I gave you between $70,000, $80,000 as a max allowable offer under normal circumstances, even if I were going to fix and flip it. And I'm able to go $100,000 because I think I can sell it for $135,000 on the open market to a retail buyer. So we started tying up deals where sellers wanted $100,000 and our max allowable offer for wholesale or fix and flip was, $80,000. So I kept leaving really nice homes that people were willing to sell at a discount, but not deep enough. And I'd see them list the property on the MLS for $140 and sell in a day for $140. I'm like, man, Steve just walked away with like $29,000 more than he would have got if he sold it to me for $100. And, so we started as we would make offers and we would negotiate, as far as we could and land at 80, the seller was at 100. We added this second layer of consideration or filter sort of to the assessment of our deals for our acquisitions agent. And we started tying up deals at $100,000 under these terms, and then listing and selling them for $130,000, $140,000, $150,000. And so then we said, well, hey, if we're already getting these deals at the appointments we're attending, let's make sure we're not turning away appointments because of equity or motivation. And then we started to loosen up the guidelines for what was required for us to physically take an appointment. It required a little less motivation, a little less pain, a little less equity. And we noticed that we picked up a couple deals there. Hey, we bought a house today from an appointment that, 6 months ago, we wouldn't have even taken. And then we went back and said, well, hey, maybe we're not even taking leads or working leads that have minimum motivation or minimum equity. And then went eventually all the way back to, who are we communicating with? And a lot of times we focus on people that have, some type of situation financially or personally, or the property has some type of distress associated with it because of normally the uglier the house, the bigger the discount. I actually said this to somebody, right? Like we all know there's a franchise out there that says we buy ugly houses. So as investors, that's kind of what we buy. We always buy like the crappiest shack on the block. So it's not the most glamorous thing to write home and tell mom that you do. It's that are mold infested and condemned. Isn't that awesome, Mom? And, by nature, I'm turning away the nice places. It's like, nah, your house is a little too nice. I like stuff that just really smells of pet urine. And, so like for me, it was just like, why am I like the bulk of the deals that I'm walking away from that I have a good relationship with the seller, they're willing to leave some equity in the deal, and I can't put these together. We found that with the structure, we were able to buy nice house. Well, we were able to invest, control, have an equitable interest in nice properties, and then sell them on the open market in the MLS and make the same returns we would make if I bought it and renovated it and sold it.
Yeah, and I think you said this was the one key change you made that really pushed you from around 200 deals a year to over 300. Is that correct?
That and Turnkey. So they both kind of, as the market started to tighten up, these deals become more important because you have, from 2007 to 2015, I was like one of two major investors in town. Like, people, it is, everybody was out of business in 2008. It was like 2010 before like the hangover wore off, right? And then people slowly started to think like, hey, maybe my brother-in-law should buy a house and fix it up, see if we can't make money. Now it's like everybody's brother-in-law with a home equity line of credit is out there, buying homes and flipping them and making money. So it's back to like what it was in 2006 for me, for what I remember. So when you are in that competitive of a climate, your ability, like if you can do $40,000 of renovation for $25,000, you'd have a competitive edge. right? If you can negotiate $10,000 lower because you're such a great negotiator than every other investor, you have a competitive advantage. So the bottom line is your ability to control expenses, pay more, sell for more, whatever. Anytime you can offer a seller more than anybody else, it gives you the ability to control more transactions. And in this market, that is everybody, even if there's no competition, sellers just have this different opinion of the value of their property because they hear that the market is so great. So we get a ton of people that call now that we weren't getting 3 years ago that were just like, well, I don't really need to sell, but I've heard that the market is just crazy. I thought maybe you would just pay me, the amount that I've been wanting for 15 years. And sometimes they're right. It's like, yeah, I mean, 15 years ago, is what it's worth now. And you can make those deals, but the majority of those people are just kind of sniffing around because they hear that the market's so crazy. And at least in our market, we just don't see huge appreciation rates. I mean, our houses are worth the same they were in 2005, right? They dropped them. They're just back now to like pre-crash values. So, you don't, it's not like some of those bigger markets where someone buys a house and 15 years later it triples in value. This is not the market for that. Not now anyway.
Makes sense.
Actually,
looks like he's watching. Go ahead, Josh.
The Novation agreement, that's like a genius strategy that we haven't had anyone on the show talk about. One clarification I wanted to ask you, because in a traditional wholesale deal, the buyer pays the wholesale fee. And that's sort of why most conventional lenders or FHA lenders don't want to deal with a wholesale transaction, in my experience. So what you're saying here, if I'm right, if I'm saying this correctly, is the seller is essentially paying your fee in a novation agreement, correct?
Yeah, like under the ideal novation structure, you'll go to settlement. There's an A to C transaction. The check is made out to A from C. So Steve gets the full check for 135, but that agreement that you have in place requires him to give you the balance over and above what he would have netted at the $100,000. So yeah, technically, I mean, depends how you look at it. I mean, the price is higher, so the buyer's paying for it, but it's not a line item on the buyer side, it's a line item on the seller side.
On the HUD one, you're getting paid by the seller, which allows a
well, so here's the thing, it's seldom on the HUD.
Oh, it's not even on the HUD.
I'm not in title. I'm not. So, but some title companies want it that way. It really comes down to a matter of preference on, who your title company is, but you're not required to be on the HUD. You're not on title.
Okay. But who's paying that fee at the end of the day? Like, because most lenders don't want to pay like a, wholesale fee, call it. So it's coming out of the seller's pocket at the end of the day, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense. Then the second part of that, because that's a really unique strategy, where do you typically find those retail buyers? Because you're not looking for that traditional wholesale type buyer. Where do you find these type of retail buyers that, I guess most of the time you're off market with these deals?
Never.
You're never off market?
I find the buyers where everybody finds buyers for their house that is as is condition. I put them in the MLS, bro.
So you're listing them straight up?
100%.
Okay.
And by the way, you should be listing your MLS deals in the MLS or your wholesale deals in the MLS. If you're not doing that, maybe that's a separate show, but I go to these conferences and we all get together and we talk about how hard it is to buy stuff. It's impossible in the MLS. The stuff's selling for prices that we can't believe. And then we talk about how to get the most money out of our wholesale deals.
I know, right?
Like, hold on, the problem you have over there is the solution that you have over here. Put your wholesale deals in the MLS.
Yeah.
Buy it and pay more than you could have sold it for out of your buyer's list.
Yeah, Josh, you and I were just talking about this other day with a couple of deals you have, right?
Putting them in the MLS.
Yeah.
That's something we don't see a lot of wholesalers doing that in the metro region here.
Well, the novation agreement is one of the things that allows you to do that. So depending on your state and then how the governing body of the real estate board looks at it, you may not be able to list it in the MLS with just equitable title. I mean, you have to look into all that stuff. But the novation agreement in almost every instance allows you to list properties in the MLS where otherwise, if you were trying to assign it, you wouldn't be able to. It's a not a lengthy explanation, but we could talk the whole show about how to list properties in the MLS.
Awesome.
Philip's asking, do you need a brokerage to agree to do that for you?
So yes, to list in the MLS, unless you use one of those listing services. There's a couple of them out there, right, where you pay like a flat and they give you access to the MLS and you do all the data entry or something like that. I think it's best to work with a real estate agent. For myself, I've been working extremely close with real estate agents for 15 years. So I do a lot of my selling with them. They bring me a lot of wholesale deals. They have buyers for my wholesale deals. I have one or a few real estate agents that I work really well with that I've trained on this novation strategy. So when we list them in the MLS, they understand how to manage that communication between the buyers, the title company, the seller, myself. It's pretty basic, but it is, a slightly different language that you use when you talk with buyers and sellers and title companies about these novation agreements. So you really just want to have, your real estate agent trained up the same way your acquisitions agent would be.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And then tell us more, like, what about your turnkey rental business? What is the structure of that? Is the goal to like sort of wholesale it and manage them, or what's that business
So
look like?
turnkey for us means we do full-blown renovations on properties that we intend to rent. Then once they're rented, we have a substantial amount of investors that want to buy properties that have, very minimal to little deferred maintenance, because we've handled all the major mechanicals, furnaces, roofs, windows, electrical, plumbing. Then we do, pretty normal cosmetic renovations. I mean, we're upgrading kitchens and baths. We put, some type of hard surface flooring on every inch of our properties, and then we rent them out. And I sell, the average turnkey for me is a property I sell to an investor for $105,000 that's rented for $1,100 a month. And that provides, attractive cap rate, and majority of our investors are from the school that they like to be leveraged. So they put 20% down. They use a Fannie Freddie Mac product. They normally get about a 12.5 to 15% cash ROI. And then we manage it for them. We have professional licensed property management. We charge, standard property management fees. We have maintenance directors, leasing agents, property managers. So basically, majority, 95% of the turnkeys we sell, the people never even come to look at the property. Most of them are from the Midwest and the West Coast, where the cost of real estate is 10 times what it is here. So they can invest $60,000 or $80,000 of their hard-earned money here and control assets worth $500,000 and make 13 to 15% cash on cash returns, and have us really do all the hard work. We found the deal, we renovated the house, we do the property management, and then they're left with a turnkey asset that they manage from afar and have very little to do with. They just have to make decisions.
Awesome.
I love it. Now I have a question for you, Eric. So obviously, from a real estate investor perspective, if you're running a real estate investment business, this makes complete sense. It's no brainer. You're capturing a lot more of the leads that typically you would not be capturing. Now, my question for you is, what's in it for the seller? Why would a seller do a novation agreement with you versus just listing on the MLS themselves and capturing, the full sale amount? And what is the sales process you use to convince sellers to go with you instead of just listing on the MLS?
So the first question that you asked it's a great question, because I think that's naturally where our minds go, right? I would ask you this question. There's lots of people watching this. We buy 250 wholesale deals a year. Why does anybody sell us a property for a discount?
Right.
Like, why? You're asking me why a seller would sell me a house for 100, right?
Yeah.
And not 70.
Yeah.
Well, they want more money.
Yeah.
Right. So what we've done, though, is we've moved a little bit of the balance of equity. How much equity are you willing to share in exchange for convenience? So all we've done is we've moved the equity position up, and we've taken away a little bit of the convenience. So what happens, that question, again, great question. I think it's the natural progression of where our minds would go. We're getting in our own way. The seller's already at this point, if you run a legitimate acquisitions process and they have a real sales process and you're doing a good job prior to making an offer, you're in this house an hour, hour 10, hour 15 minutes, okay? So when you start to make proposals to the customer that say something like, Josh, it really seems like we're just not able to get together on price. Josh, yeah, and it's a darn shame because I was really hoping we'd be able to get something worked out here. I mean, I really like the property. I sort of get the feeling that you were interested in doing business with me, but that pesky price keeps getting in the way. Is that really the deal? Yeah. Well, we've worked really hard in our business to try and come up with creative ways to get sellers the maximum amount of money possible. And occasionally we come across an idea that is able to get clients more for their home than what they might be able to get by conventionally selling it to me for cash. Would you be open to some suggestions if it meant I might be able to get you, I don't know, an extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 for your house? Guess what they're going to say? Yeah, I'd be open to that. I like you. I trust you. I'd love to sell you my house, right? This isn't like you're going to whip out this novation agreement and all the deals that you're not able to close are going to just roll over, right? There's an explanation process to it. What I want to give you is a little bit of the sales aspect of it, is all you're doing is asking for an exchange of convenience, and in return, you're going to give them more money because they've essentially decided at this point, as you would prepare to normally leave the appointment, that they're not willing to give up enough equity for the convenience of closing in a week or closing in 2 weeks and not having showings. So what are they anticipating? They're anticipating, oh God, I guess I'm going to have to list it. Their mind's already going there. Mm-hmm. If they don't sell to you as an investor or anybody else that's willing to pay cash for it, what's their other alternative?
Yeah.
List it. So as you progress towards that, and I don't say, hey, if I list it for you and keep the difference, wouldn't that be a sweet deal? I mean, you got to polish it up a little bit and be able to present it, right? There's 1,000 different ways to do that. Most anybody that's buying wholesale deals and doing real estate now, you're already convincing people to settle at much lower prices. So you're not gonna have a tough time paying people more money in exchange for some terms. It's easy to I can easily get Rob and Josh to leave the light on out front for me than I can to give me $100, right? So people are more willing to give up some convenience and do a little bit of work, particularly when they're capped out when it comes to money. So it's not that hard. It's just not. So the best part is if you're doing a good job, you should be starting extremely low, right? So we call it here, a good friend of mine, John Martinez, probably one of the best sales trainers around, talks about dropping an anchor. So when we drop an anchor, that means I'm offering 40-ish or 45. I think, Josh, is what homes like this are selling for. Is that kind of what you were thinking? No, I got to get 70. Then I work my way up, right? So anytime I move from my anchor, I talk about terms. Well, if it meant getting you closer to 50 instead of 40, Josh, would you be open to some flexibility? Well, what do you mean by flexibility? Well, that's when we start to talk. Well, if I could show it to a couple people, if I had access to it, if I didn't have to close in 7 days. Well, I don't need to close in 7 days. 60's fine. Oh, okay. Well, I think we're getting somewhere, right? So like now what it's done is a couple things. I've planted the seed that in order for them to get more money, they have to give up something, right? To terms, exactly. Anytime you talk about moving up in price, justify it by them giving up something. It adds credibility to your original offer, and it gives you the opportunity to get flexibility from the seller in exchange for a little bit more money.
Wow. You explained that so well.
That's awesome. I think that was a great strategy. Actually, I got a question. So it sounds like a lot of us have gone through the John Martinez training. Do you follow his training to a T where you just throw out a low anchor and give him your number, or do you ask for the seller's number first?
I think if you really stick to John's process, he'd tell you to do whatever the situation calls for. There are some non-negotiables in that process. But when it comes down to how to make the offer, when to make the offer, who should make the first offer, I think that really has a lot to do with the rest of the process. If we're digging into, what we call the pain continuum, or John calls the pain continuum, right? Like you're able to buy a home at a discount when you can get an accurate description from the seller about their position and what pain comes with that, and then what they want to get accomplished, and then how good that feels. And the difference between those two is how you're able to negotiate equity, right? So the best job that you can do as a negotiator is to make it clear to them that this gap is this big or this big. And as the gap gets bigger, so does your profit. So I would tell you to be flexible when it comes to when to make an offer and how to make the offer. I always make a suggestion, not an offer. I'll say things like, I know sometimes people go to auctions, right? And I use auctions for one reason, because a lot of people that are selling a home as is may consider going that route, particularly in our area, older folks, estates, things like that. It's a nice, clean, predictable way for attorneys to help liquidate, family estates. So I'll say, I've often been at auctions where homes like this sell for, I don't know, $45,000, $50,000. I didn't make them an offer, but I promise you I'm going to get a response. They're going to say, well, I would never sell this for 45 to 50. And now we've entered in negotiations, whether they know it or not. So I'm always very casual about how I make offers, and I make more of suggestions, and I'll incorporate numbers or values in just normal conversation, and I'll look for a response. And that's typically how I would suggest, and I think John's training would also lead you to believe would be the best approach when it comes to starting negotiations.
That's awesome. I think that's a great advice. One of the questions I have for you, Eric, I mean, you're running a phenomenal business. How do you decide which properties become turnkeys versus which ones you end up wholesaling or novating? What's the sort of criteria there for you?
So we run each of our deals when they come back from the acquisitions agent and have an acquisitions manager, and he runs them through 3 different filters: wholesale, novation, turnkey, fix and flip. And then we'll see what the difference is. We have a general rule of thumb, like I'll wholesale something as long as I can make 50% or higher of what I would make if I had paid for it and fixed it up and flipped it. Our preferred structure is always to novate it. The difference is their cash is still king. I mean, if a wholesale buyer, cash buyer will pay me a $25,000 assignment fee and I could make 35 by novating it, but the novation customer, typically has a mortgage and inspections and appraisals. If that takes 45 days and I have a buyer that can close in 5 days, I'll probably still go with the 5 days. There's got to be a significant difference in the net proceeds for me in order to go that route.
That makes sense.
So bottom line is, when we get a deal, Josh, we run it through 3 filters. At the bottom, it shows us what the capital investment would be, what the time commitment would be, and then what the net profit would be, and we balance each of those. And we typically put them out for all 3 of those, and it's almost like first come, first serve. But our preferred exit strategy is wholesale for all of the deals that we have enough of equity in to make a good deal.
Awesome.
Now, it sounds like with all these different exit strategies, really what you're trying to do is monetize every lead that comes in, because you can either wholesale it, you can flip it, you can novation agreement it, or it sounds like you're also doing a lot of just conventional retail sales as well. So is the idea every single lead that comes in, we're just going to put it into one of those buckets and try to monetize every single lead?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the way it's ended up. I don't know if that was the direction, but yeah, I mean, we have multiple ways that we can monetize that lead. I think the last one being our ability to refer it to one of the agents that works with us on our team, have them list it, and then we get a referral back for that commission. And that's where you'll find a lot of, if you want to look for where you have novation deals, look how many referrals you're sending to your buddy who's a real estate agent.
Yeah.
And when you're getting those, $1,500 referral checks, imagine if those were 15,000.
Right.
Because those are the deals, right? Like if you got somebody to 100,000 and you knew it would sell for 135, and you would refer it to your buddy who's a realtor, he sold it for 135 and gave you 25% of his 4,000. You're going to check for $1,000. Like, it's cool, but it's not as cool as a $15,000 check. I'd rather take the $15,000 check. Like, and by the way, I'm still going to give the listing to my buddy.
Yeah.
And he should still pay me the 25% referral because he's still got the listing. He's just on behalf of me and my interest in the property, not Steve and Mary Smith.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. And now with all these different buckets, what percentage of your total leads that come in do you think you're able to completely monetize?
We get between inbound and outbound probably 400 or so leads. We contract, between 25 and 35 properties a month. 90% of those go to settlement, and then we refer out and list probably 10 properties a month to our retail team that eventually go to listings. So what's that? You say split the difference on, let's say 30 acquisitions a month. 10 listings is 40. Am I missing anything? So 10%.
10%. That's
pretty impressive.
That's solid.
And like 8% of that is we actually sold it.
Yeah.
2% or whatever that number comes out to is listings. So the larger portion of what we're monetizing is the 15,000 style check, not the referral style listing commission check.
Makes sense.
So Robert, we've asked this to a few of our high level speakers. Eric, what do you think your superpower is in this business? What's the one superpower you can look and say, like, that's what I bring to my business?
I would tell you 5 years ago it was sales. Like I've just, ever since I've sort of got into the car business, I've always been the top sales guy. But there came a, pretty quick point in our business to where I needed to make a much bigger contribution than just buying and selling. I would tell you today, I don't know if I'm far enough along for it to be my superpower. We'll call it an aspirational superpower, is leadership.
Makes sense. And what are the things that you look at in how you are as a leader? Like, what are the attributes that you think have made an impact?
Man, it's like 1,000 things really. But if I were to try and minimize it, controlling the culture in your organization, establishing a level of trust across so I have 40 plus employees, just to put it in perspective. So, you have 40 people, like there's a lot of different personalities. There's different skill sets. There's different long-term goals, short-term goals. Income ranges from 40 to 400,000. So from a leadership perspective, my job is to get all of those people working and operating cohesively as a unit, while not trying to kill each other. So, getting people, like literally, so hiring, culture, big ideas. It wasn't my idea, but Turnkey for us started about 2 years ago. And, during COVID, Pennsylvania, I think at some point was the only state remaining in the union where real estate wasn't essential.
Wow.
We were able to continue selling our turnkey inventory because our buyers are almost 100% virtual. Wow. So we not only survived the lockdown, which in Pennsylvania, I mean, literally I don't remember the exact date, but it was almost 3 months where, if you weren't essential, you could only leave your home for, you had to be going to the hospital or the grocery store. Like that was the only two things you were allowed to do. We were able to continue selling properties throughout that, terrible chain of events. And not only did we stay in business, I added 5 people during COVID. And, it was a pretty remarkable, I don't even know what you would call it. I mean, I think everybody went through, I was actually at a rather large real estate conference the day the NBA shut down. And then shortly after that, all hell broke loose. Like everything was closed down. And I mean, I don't even like to think about what was going through my head. I had 40 employees. We got 170 properties in my pipeline. That's not including the properties that we manage and hold. So between the properties we manage on behalf of our investors, my own personal rental portfolio, and our inventory of incoming acquisitions, properties under renovation, and properties that were sold, it was almost 600 properties. So, there was a lot going through my head, and my primary concern, and when I just remember telling myself, don't lay anybody off, don't lay anybody off, don't lay anybody off. And we were able to remain active enough and profitable enough that through that entire ordeal, we not only didn't lay anybody off, we did enough business and grew to the extent to where I needed to add people. And there was no better time to hire talent than during COVID. I mean, we got some extraordinary people. And, so it's some people unfortunately lost their job, and their jobs they never intended to leave. But they were taken from them for one reason or another, or their hours were cut. Who knows? But we hired some extraordinary people, and I think in large part it was because of either the loss of employment because of COVID. Two of the people that we hired were entrepreneurs, and they just became uncomfortable with being an entrepreneur in that climate. And one of the guys even said, he's like, I want someone like you to worry about what's going to happen. I just want to show up and do my job. It was cool while I lived there, visited for a little bit, but I want to go back to being a solid contributor, So that was quite a pickup for us. It was a guy that was running his own wholesale fix and flip business, doing 50 deals a year. Now he's an executive level leader on our team that runs our marketing and acquisitions department. So that was a tremendous acquisition for me.
Wow.
So does that answer your question about leadership? I know I got a little bit sideways there, Josh, but it's
that's awesome.
Yeah, I don't claim to know enough to write a book about it. Like, that's why I said it's an aspirational superpower of mine. It's where I spend all of my time, energy, and focus is big ideas, big relationships, and then just literally to try and have an extraordinary connection and ability to get the most out of everybody that trusts me enough to come work here.
Yeah, makes sense.
Any favorite sort of reading material for our viewers that they should look into that might help them in their business? Or
so it really depends on where you are in your business. A couple for me have been at the base level as I started to build a team was the 5 dysfunctions of a team. I think 4DX is a must read for anybody that's in this business. It talks a tremendous amount about scoreboards, KPIs, ROI, tracking, all of that stuff. And it puts it in a very legible format for guys like me with like a 3rd grade reading level. So 4DX is really good. And then for leadership, I'm reading one right now that's an absolute killer. It's called Multipliers. And then a marketing book, I think that would be good for everybody, would be Tipping Point. I've read it twice. Oddly enough, I started reading it right when COVID came out, and the beginning of the book talks about epidemics, and social epidemics, how tipping point, how things go from being just, sort of normal to being an epidemic. It's just really odd timing. But beyond that, the book is really good when it comes to marketing and messaging. And I've learned a tremendous amount about marketing by reading that book.
Awesome.
Now, you're also a big fan of traction, right? It sounds like you've implemented the EOS system in your business. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually tried to read the book Traction like 6 times. I wanted to punch myself in the face. It is not an easy read. But it basically is the how-to manual for EOS. I would actually recommend, unless you're just, super patient and can listen through countless hours of monotone, traction. I think if you read 5 dysfunctions of a team and then you read 4DX, those two combined will tell you literally everything that you would learn from EOS. And I think it's a good balance of leadership, accountability, and then just some of the psychology behind the metrics of people having to report their behavior and their results. But EOS has changed my business.
Yeah, I'm going through it for the second time today, trying to get it. I read it like 3 years ago, and I it was in my brain, but you need to like refresh it every once in a while. I never actually went through and filled everything out, so now I'm like working on that right now, trying to like fill out all the worksheets and get my rocks in place and all that. But
if I can throw a shout out, I had a EOS coach. I hired a guy by the name of Gary Harper. Run Sharper Business Solutions, and him and his wife came here for 3 days, 3 power days, and I had my entire leadership team locked in a room for 10 hours a day, and we implemented EOS. So it's, I wouldn't say it's expensive, but it costs money for those 3 days. But literally, I might have had to have read Traction 30 times before I could have got accomplished what I was ready, able, willing, and equipped to be able to do after 3 days of going through an EOS boot camp. So I think there's a number of them out there. There's EOS implementers, coaches, certified people in EOS. I personally, to this day, after a little over 3 years, continue to use Gary in a number of different facets. He's been instrumental in hiring a COO. He's hired project managers for me. We've invested a tremendous amount of money in predictive index behavioral assessment software. Gary's been instrumental in coaching me on that. And then I consult with him on a one-on-one basis, and he helps me through different phases of our business that I need some guidance for.
Yeah. Now, behavior profiling, I think that's one thing that not a lot of businesses are doing right now. A lot of entrepreneurs I talk to, they're literally trying to wear all the hats in their business. And I think one of the key tenets of EOS is really figuring out what you're good at, putting yourself in that seat, and then putting other people in the right seats, right people in the right seats. Can you talk to us a little bit about behavior profiling, how you're implementing that in your business, and what some of the results have been?
Yeah. So when I talk about my superpower being leadership, it was probably the thing I was the worst at. I was an absolute terror to work with 10 years ago. I knew everything. Every decision had to be passed through me. I was a micromanager or a diminisher. For anybody that's read the book Multipliers as you work through it, it's called a diminisher, which is the opposite of a multiplier. And so for EOS, the first thing that we did was right people, right seats. So what we did is we took everybody out of their seat. Then we went, here's the 7 key departments. You have marketing, lead management, acquisitions, dispositions, renovations, property management, and finance. And we said, okay, here's what the ideal profile looks like to sit in that seat. That's directly from EOS, right? They have behavioral profile. And they said, hey, to be in finance, you should be really detail oriented. You should be a patient person. You shouldn't be a chatty Cathy, right? Like they have a profile of what someone should look like if they're going to sit in a finance seat. They have one for property management. This is all based off of best practices. So the way that they do that is they go, hey, here's 10 of the best project managers around. Let's give them a behavioral profile. And then we create an avatar for the ideal project manager. So we had that for every position, and we sat and we said, okay, that's the position. Who's going to be in that position? We go, Mary, she's in finance. And then we put Mary's profile next to finance. Mm-hmm. And if Mary's profile didn't match up, we would say, well, what are we going to do? Mary, are you willing to modify that behavior long enough to be successful in that department? And do you understand the value and the importance of the accuracy of your work? When we did that out of 7 seats, I had like 80% of the people in the wrong seat. I had good people, but they were in the wrong seat. And Gary told me at that day, he's like, dude, when I come back in a year, I think you're going to be doing well, but I think you're going to find that most of those people are either here or in that same seat. So that might sound harsh and cruel, but like what we try and do is repurpose. If I had good people and they were in the wrong seat, I'd try and repurpose them. Because if you think about from finance to acquisitions, there's a pretty broad range of skill set that's required to be an ideal player in that seat. So we retained a lot of our people, but after, I think it was about a year, we had almost 100% turnover on our leadership team.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. Now, I was initially skeptical of behavior profiling until we tried it at one of the companies I was working with, and we profiled every single salesperson on the sales team. Then what we did is we compared that against how much revenue each of them brought in. And interesting enough, all of the top producers, the ones that were really the outliers, all had the exact same identical behavior profile. As soon as I saw that, I was like, wow, this stuff works 100%.
Yeah.
And then,
so now if you can imagine, when you start to make decisions about when you want to hire a top salesperson, you have a profile that you know that you should be focused on.
right.
It's amazing, even behind the hiring process, when you get into leadership, and I have, interdepartment communication, I can go to those personality profiles and know how these two people should communicate so that they're able to know that they're being heard, but not feel, confronted or, somehow threatened by this other person's communication. So oftentimes what I find one of my advancements in leadership is to be the way that I communicate with people at times can be drastically different based on their personality profile. It can be more direct with some people that are like, dude, shut up and just tell me what the heck you need from me. Other people like to be slow played and eased into a conversation, particularly if it's, something of relative magnitude. It's an extraordinary tool. I cannot imagine trying to run a business, hire people, fire people, manage people, train people without it. It's literally, begins almost every conversation I have with a prospective employee or someone that's already a team member and working with me.
Yeah. Wow. Now, I got a question for you about a problem I see on a lot of teams. And that is, one of the biggest problems with hiring process in this industry is always super high turnover. Okay. You hire a bunch of people, 1 in 3 works out, becomes an all-star. The other 2 end up usually spinning out within the first 90 days or so. So you're constantly trying to find your A players. Then you find those A players. And I think predictive profiling obviously helps that a lot because you can make sure they have the right profile first. But now you have this rock star team. And it seems like every time you have a rock star team, as soon as the rock stars learn the whole business, they leave and go and do it on their own. How do you prevent that? Do you try preventing that? And have you experienced that in your business?
How much time you got? So that's good. It all goes back to leadership, right? So, you think about oh man, let me think where I can start. Okay. So I think a large misconception for a lot of people is if I teach people too much, they'll go out on their own and do it. The reality is that's a real threat. I don't know where it is, but there's a quote around somewhere, and it says, the CEO said to the president, what happens if we teach him everything we know and he leaves? And the president said, what happens if we don't and he stays?
Right.
So just let that sink in for a second, right? Like you either have to constantly pour into your people and give them every opportunity to meet or exceed your wildest dreams of what you thought you could accomplish on your own. And the risk that you run is they may leave.
Yep.
Right? Now, the reality of the situation is they're getting there and they're accomplishing things because of your encouragement, because of your leadership, because of your support. The likelihood may be that they'll leave and they'll fail. Now, maybe they do well, maybe they fail, but without you in the picture, the reality is that oftentimes those people are missing an important part of their success, which has been you as a mentor or a leader or a coach or an accountability partner, whatever you want to call it. So what I've found, though, is more often than not, what happens is as I develop and pour into people and help them become better, it raises their ceiling, which then starts to push me out. And then I constantly have to continue to evolve. So by me pouring into people, it's a built-in ecosystem that drives me to have to do better, or I'll no longer have anything to give them. And when I stop having something to give them, that's when they'll leave.
Got you.
That makes sense?
That makes a lot.
You had an interesting post about this morning, right? You said that you've been interviewing a lot of people. I think right before this, you were in an interview, and you did a post this morning about the top 3 reasons why people leave companies. Can you share that with the group?
Yeah, so like I've interviewed, I don't know, probably a dozen people in the last week. We hired one right before we got on here, and so we've hired maybe a handful of people in the last 7 days. And the most common reasons I heard that people were now, so they're not even like all of them were employed. All of them continue. Well, all but the 5 that I hired are still working where they were working when they came in. So they weren't unhappy. Right? These aren't disgruntled employees. They were people that were looking for something new. And in my conversation, what I discovered is that the reoccurring themes with every single one of these people, whether we hired them or we decided not to, was that communication, which means a lot of different things, right? Like communication is a pretty broad term, but it was at the core of what was making them feel unsettled or unsatisfied with where they were. The second was leadership, and I couldn't believe that's probably the most surprising. And I don't know any other way to say it than people, I think, struggle to identify and congratulate leadership as it's happening, but they definitely respond and feel slighted in the absence of leadership. So I just don't feel that like too often it's talked about, right? They talk about like the subcategories of leadership, but I actually heard the word leadership multiple times, which was different to me. I don't know, it just kind of jumped out to me. And then the third one was, they saw no opportunity for them to grow. And the important part about that is that some people go, well, grow where? Like the guy was the vice president, I'm the president, I'm not leaving. Right. So we always assume that there's some type of monetary attachment or a title attachment to it. And what I found is I dug into that. So when you start talking about behavioral profiles, like I knew to ask these questions of these people because of their behavioral profile. And then the way that I would ask that question would change from 1 to the 12th person based on their behavioral profile. And what I would learn from them, and there was a wide range of answers, it was the contribution of their work, the challenge of the work. Sometimes what felt like opportunity for growth for them was just, how many times can I be congratulated during the course of a normal week? But not everybody is a great communicator. Not everybody can verbalize how they're feeling. So when someone says, there's lack of an opportunity for growth, for one of those people that I talked to, it meant someone just wasn't patting them on the back enough. They didn't have a number. Part of EOS and traction will tell you is every person should have a number. Well, why? Well, because if Steve knows that he's supposed to write up 5 contracts a week, every time he gets 5, 6, 7 or more, I get to go to Steve and I go, Steve, man, you're killing it, dude. Keep up the great work. Every time he gets to 2 and it's halfway through the week, I can see his number and I can say, Steve, man, you're awful close to tracking those 5 for this week. What if I can do something to help you get over that edge? Is there anything I can do? Is there anything you can do? Steve goes, yeah, you know what? I could probably come in a little bit early tomorrow morning. So that feels like growth to people. You got to be real granular about what it means, because we oftentimes project what we consider to be growth onto our people, and it's 95% of the time not what you think it is.
Yeah. Awesome answer.
Well, on that note, Eric, I think the advice tonight's been like, we haven't had anything like this on any show today. If you had an employee, on the topic of leadership, if you had an employee that wasn't quite cutting it, they have metrics that they're being measured against weekly, what would be your step with that employee, your next step as a leader of that company? What would you tell that person who's gone like 2-3 weeks without cutting?
One day, I hope to run a company, you heard it here first, right? It has a no fire policy.
Yeah.
So let me explain, right? Everybody's like, you're nuts. Okay. So if you couldn't fire anybody, how would your managers or the people in your company approach hiring? Would they get better at it?
Careful. You'd probably be a hell of a lot more careful, right?
Yeah. If they couldn't fire them, what happens if they're not performing, Josh? What are your options? If you can't fire them, what options do you have?
They got to improve.
And for me as their manager, how do I help them improve?
Try to hold them accountable.
Train. We're terrible at it, right? Our training is, I'll tell you what my training was for the longest time before I started paying attention to leadership. Come with me. I'm going to buy 4 houses, and then remember what I said, and then do what I do. And then by the end of this week, I'm going to need you to go out on your own. I mean, it's literally how we train people. And in our defense, we're busy. We're wearing a bunch of hats. We're doing all that stuff, right? But now, for me as a leader, one of the things I can commit to is when the time is right, and if the team needs me to, I can commit to training somebody for like a whole week if they need it, right? Like, so we are so, as an industry, bad with training because it's hard. It's hard hiring someone because we're already probably doing too many things. So it's hard for us to prioritize training because oftentimes the position that we're filling, we do at such a high level, we think that the learning curve for that person should be relatively quick. And how often do we say, they just didn't get it? No, you didn't train them on how to get it enough times. So my point would be is that I think when it comes to turnover and training and culture and all that stuff, you can't have a no-fire policy. Right? There's going to be times where people check out, or we made a mistake in the interviewing process, or something about their life situation has changed that's having a negative impact on their production. But there's two reasons why most people fail or their productivity stinks. It's because they haven't been properly trained, or they're unclear on their expectations. Like, they're supposed to be doing 5 deals a week, but they don't know, or they don't remember, or they're not being reminded enough.
Awesome.
I love it. We got a question coming in from Philip. He says, what if you pour a lot and they sit on their hands? It makes them feel cush. I'm from a hunter mentality.
Again, we're assuming that, this person, otherwise they're already sitting on their hands then. Right. So like, we're talking about people you already have. Your choice is to allow them to sit on their hands and not pour into them, or pour into them and allow them to sit on their hands. At some point, even if they're sitting on their hands and they don't have that same hunter mentality, they're a more educated non-hunter. They're more qualified to not hunt. Right. So what they choose to do with that is entirely up to them. But to go back to hiring processes is like, one of the things that we put at the center of all of our decisions, whether it's hiring, firing, coaching, or holding accountable, is a set of core values that are non-negotiable. And one of our core values is a commitment to excellence. So it's not, if that gentleman that put that question up there, he should hire people that have a hunter mentality. If that's part of his core values, there's a great exercise you can go through. It might even be part of EOS, or it's a close cousin from EOS. It talks about how to identify your company's core values, which starts with you as the leader. And, what'll happen is, as you start to add people, if you're non-negotiable on that type stuff, you're not pouring into people that sit on their hands, because had you identified that as hard work or a hunter mentality or being hungry as one of your core values that are non-negotiable, you shouldn't have hired or had anybody in the organization that would sit on that information. They would be thrilled to be blessed with you pouring into them, and would do what you would do if someone gave you that same opportunity.
Wow, great tips.
On that note, what are some of the other core values that your company has? Commitment to excellence.
Yeah, just to be clear, if you're going to be non-negotiable on them, you shouldn't have more than about 4, or you're going to get awful tricky when you try and hire people based on. So ours is PIER, P-I-E-R, perspective and belief. For me, that just means that, like, I need you to have a how can I attitude, not a negative attitude. I believe with the right perspective, resources, and people, anything's possible. Obviously, in real estate, the one thing that's consistent is problems, issues, challenges. It is a tough business. If you don't have the right perspective, I can't work with you. I need you to be positive. Integrity. So that's the I in PIER. Do what you say you're going to do. Simple and plain. E is a commitment to excellence. So I had to make it PIER, so I couldn't put the C first. So don't be too hard on me in the comments. But excellence, we want a commitment to excellence. Commitment to excellence means you're constantly, searching for more. You're trying to get better at what you do. And for us, we always say, I don't want to be the best, because you can be the best in your market. You can be the best in your state. You can be the best guy around and still kind of suck. So our commitment to excellence is this elusive I use the terminology world class. I want to be world class at the things that we do. So a commitment to excellence and then respect. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Respect shows up a lot of different ways, but you have to be respectful to your clients, be respectful to your coworkers. We just do not tolerate the lack of respect or disrespect. It's non-negotiable for me.
Guys, this has been awesome. If you've been enjoying the content tonight, please hit the like button below. If I've learned myself something tonight, I mean, leadership is everything. If you guys want to get to 375 deals a year, focus on your leadership. Eric, how can folks reach out to you about your business, like your wholesale deals, your turnkey rentals? What's a good way to reach out to you?
There's a couple different ways. I actually have an entire curriculum put together about novations. You'll get access to an hour and 10-minute roughly webinar where I do a couple case studies. I walk through everything from the acquisitions agreement all the way through the novation agreement to the power of attorney to the settlement sheet to the distribution sheet showing how you get paid. We do a couple case studies during that webinar, and I walk you through each of the documents. You also get access to PDF versions of the documents that I'm using right now to do 60 to 80 novation deals a year in my market, doing over $2 to $2.5 million in gross profit using that strategy on deals that you're probably throwing away right now. If you're looking to invest in turnkey rentals, you can go to integrityfirsthomebuyers.com or paturnkeys.com. Each of those websites have a little bit of information about us depending on what your interest may be. And then I'm on Facebook. I'm a pretty regular person on Facebook. I do morning videos where I talk a little bit about whatever's going on. Part of my leadership journey has been to constantly learn from the people that have been to where I want to go when it comes to leadership. So I read a lot of books. I listen to a lot of stuff on Audible. And then a lot of times the morning drive to work, I share whatever that most recent lesson was from my previous workday, something that happened in an interaction with a customer or an employee, or whatever I read in that book that day that kind of stuck with me. Because for me, the ultimate test of whether or not I've learned something is if I can teach it. So about 2 years ago, I started doing videos on my morning drive to work and trying to teach people things that I learned. And so you can find me on Facebook if you want to connect. I try and respond. I think even the three of us got connected through Facebook Messenger. So, right? Like, I think that's how we got connected through Facebook. Yeah. And then eventually I almost forgot about tonight's show. And thank God these guys messaged me about 7 minutes before deadline. And I was able to hop in real quick and make sure I didn't embarrass myself by being late to my own party. So that's the best way to find me. You can go to brewermethod.com, and that is the Novation package. I was texting back and forth with someone that had signed up for the Brewer Method just a few days ago, and we were able to get the deal structured for him. It looks like he's going to make a substantial profit on it, and it was a deal that he was in the process of releasing. So he was pretty happy about that. So that's also available for you. You can download all the documents, and then there's a private Facebook group that comes with it where once a month I hop on there and we do a live Q&A. I help people structure deals and answer just basic questions about how to get more out of novations.
Wow.
I love it. I gotta say, Eric, I've been following you for a while. It's like a daily routine now. I start off my day, watch Eric Brewer driving to work. Every day I watch it.
Dude, it's perfect for me. It makes the morning drive go by. It seems like 30 seconds. I don't get, pissed at people in traffic anymore. I'm happy to be stuck in traffic. It just gives me an extra 5 to 10 minutes to continue blabbing on my video. But I tell you what, there's so the crazy thing about this, and I'll let you go real quick. I did a presentation at a mastermind group. Everybody loves referrals.
Yeah.
We all love referrals. If you know someone looking to sell your house, sell their house, I buy houses for cash. Talk about blah, blah, blah. We talk about it all the time. Well, who do you get referrals from? People that know you and like you. Well, who knows you and likes you? People that normally a close-knit group of friends. I started doing Facebook Live videos, and after 6 months, I was getting referrals from complete strangers. You know why? They knew me and they liked me.
Yeah.
We did over $600,000 in revenue in 2019 from referrals to my Facebook inbox from complete strangers. Strangers, like we were Facebook friends. I wouldn't know them if they were standing in my living room. Like that's, to me, like that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like we think we can only get referrals from people in our database or previous customers or my brother's girlfriend's attorney. Like I've found out otherwise. And so now, of course, it was therapeutic for me. I felt like I was developing as a leader, and I'm gonna get some deals off of it. I don't miss a morning typically. Like it's gotten to be fun. Plus it's profitable. So
I see this happening. I've been on the receiving end of this because we haven't officially met before this. We've been friends on Facebook for a long time. I've been watching your videos almost daily for a very long time. But even before that, how I ended up subscribing to your videos was I would just be in random conversations with people about, big players in the industry, and your name kept on coming up over and over and over again. I mean, I remember the last mastermind I was at with John Martinez. Your name came up multiple times. I had a great conversation with John Martinez about your business.
Yeah,
I think
John's
maybe
you
being on Facebook every day, it's like it's keeping you top of mind and all these people's minds, and then it spreads your name around, and then you end up having a lot more opportunities.
Yeah, which was for me, it's not why I started doing it. I mean, it was literally like, hey, I realized if I know I had, like, it became a built-in accountability system for me to continue to learn.
Yeah.
And I told you about, like, as you continue to pour into people and develop your people, if your ceiling doesn't raise, it creates a ceiling for them. Like they can only grow as high as the ceiling that you create. So I realized that I needed to get, like, I can't just be the guy that's a really good closer or knows ARV off the top of my head. I've flipped over 4,500 homes. Like I don't pull comps anymore. I've sold 3 homes on the street. But that doesn't add tremendous value to the 42 people that work here, right? Like it doesn't take them more than 7 minutes to pull comps. So the fact that I know what ARV is off the top of my head means squat. Yeah. So I had to go, all right, well, like, what am I going to do for a living now? Like these people don't really need me to do the stuff that I was really good at, that I loved. And I had to start to develop and become better at things that I never even paid attention to before. And the best way for me to learn that was to do Facebook videos. And it turned out you can get deals off of it too. So it was like money, fun, I'm in. Right. It was 2 of my favorite things.
I love it.
Yeah.
We just started doing this show a few months ago, and I think I have 500 Facebook friend requests I gotta get through. I was thinking about just clicking accept all on all of them. I'm sure there's some Bitcoin spammer somewhere in there, but filtering through them all might take a while. But yeah, it really works. So great tips. If you guys want to learn and keep yourself accountable, jump on Facebook. Do some daily drive videos.
And I would suggest to do them live, because if you do them recorded and you go and you're like, you start it and you start over again. When you're live, like, people give you a little bit more grace too, right? It's like live television. Oh, we slept up, but no big deal. It's live. Like I say 74,000 times every 12 minutes. It is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, I think people love what they love, and the reason I was able to see referrals that came from that is the fact that it was live. Like you're just being yourself. You're being genuine. I make mistakes. People give me a hard time. Sometimes if I slipped up and used some potty words, my 5-year-old would give me heck when I got home. If I wasn't keeping my eyes on the road and I would look too much at the phone, hey, you need to stay focused on the road. But it's real. So that's what people like, is when it's real and it's live. And for me, it was just easier. I would just get on there and like, okay, time to start talking. There's 11 people watching.
I love it. I've always joked with Josh. I always say, you and I, we should just record our cell phone conversations or just live stream them, because we get into so much stuff. Like we're on the phone like almost every day talking about debating so many issues in real estate. I'm like, man, people would pay money to listen to our calls.
Absolutely.
That's great. Awesome. This has been excellent. Josh, any final thoughts before we've kept you really long on here, Eric? I know you probably got to head home for dinner. But Josh, any final thoughts before you wrap things up? What do you think your biggest insight has been so far?
Eric, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been awesome. I think definitely developing leadership in your firm, becoming a better leader yourself, having an executive team that manages, training and accountability. Training was a huge one. Can't agree more with that most of us fail in this business in training. Robert, you're the, now I call you Elon Musk of real estate. What are your final thoughts tonight?
Well, I think I always tell people, every single business that works with me, I say this business is not that complicated. People make it way too complicated. You just got to focus on 2 metrics. If you focus on those 2 metrics, your business will be successful. And I've used this strategy to grow multiple wholesale businesses to over $1 million per month in assignment fees earned. And it's 2 metrics are, what is your return on ad spend and what is your cash conversion cycle? Okay. And if you just optimize both of those, then you'll have a very profitable and very scalable business, right? So for every dollar I plug in, how many dollars do I get back? How fast can I do that? Okay. A few cycles of that, you can get to $1 million a month. What I love about the innovation, or so the Novation agreement, is it is going to juice up the return on ad spend. It's going to give you more dollars back for every dollar you spend, which means now you can pay more per lead than your competitors. And in any market, whoever can pay the most for a lead dominates the market. So I think that was my key insight off of this whole strategy. Is like, hey, if you want to dominate, you got to be doing this.
Let me just leave you with something real quick. There's a gentleman that signed up and participates in our program. And I want to say he's in the Phoenix market. There's big iBuyer activity out there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, man, I can't compete with them. And now he can. I mean, if you think about it, what do typically iBuyers purchase? Paint and carpet, newer construction, nice properties, and operating on razor thin margins.
Yeah.
This allows you to compete with iBuyers because you're not, their cost of capital is extremely inexpensive, right? So like they don't have all this other closing costs that guys that have hard money do. So if they take down a $200,000 property, they're in it for $202,000, right? Where you might be in it for $210,000, and they have an excess of capital. So half the time we want to wholesale just because I don't want to tie up $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000, right? Because of all the responsibility that comes with it. So that's why so much of us, myself, right? We're fortunate enough to have access to more than enough capital to do the transactions we do, but I still wholesale over 50% of them, right? Like I love the wholesale transaction. And this is a wholesale style transaction with retail returns. So not only can you do more deals, but here's the other thing we didn't even talk about. When you lock up a wholesale deal at 70 and you can wholesale it for 85, but it's still worth 135 as is. So now, even if you didn't pick up any more deals, but on 20 of your transactions a year, you made an extra 15 grand. It's another, you do the math, $300,000 in revenue. If you average $15,000 per deal, how many more deals would you have to do? And then if you do the other math, how many more leads would I have to generate? How many more calls would I have to answer? How many more postcards would I have to send? This gives you increased capital with no increased risk.
I love it. It's incredible.
Oh, so the last thing was, you asked me how that came about. I was houses in 2008, and anybody that's been around, the FHA flip waiver expired in 2010. So I used to be able to buy and turn around and sell houses right away to FHA buyers. The flip waiver expired, and I couldn't do that anymore. Now I had to hold a house for 91 days before a person could write a contract on my flip. And I was like, well, that sucks. I mean, I can't, if I have to hold on my inventory for an extra 91 days, I can't do as many deals per year because I only have a limited amount of access to money. And I worked with my attorney, and, I was like, how can we do this? And we ended up engineering this, what we call the Brewer method, which is super corny to me, but that's what it is. It's novation. Steve Trang talked me into calling it. He's, dude, you can't call it novation. That's basic. You got to call it something else.
Brewer method.
I love it. It's like, it sounds so egotistical, but whatever. It is what it is. So yeah, I mean, that's how it started. We were working around FHA flip seasoning requirements.
Wow.
Awesome.
Forced innovation. I love it. That's incredible. Awesome. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up here, Eric?
Nah, I'm good. I appreciate you guys having me on here. I get pretty pumped up to talk about things like leadership and houses and deals and stuff like that. And anytime someone's willing to hear me rattle off a bunch of stuff that to me is, super, super fun. I love being a part of it. So I appreciate you guys thinking of me and bring me on here. And I've had a good time chopping it up.
We loved it. This is incredible show.
Zoom breakfast next.
Zoom breakfast. Awesome. Eric, it's been great having you on the show. We got to have you on again soon. Maybe we'll have to jump in on some of your morning live streams.
Yeah, hop in. Up, man. If you get on there, you got to be careful. Every once in a while, I'll bring you on the screen.
I love it. I'm all about that. I'm not scared at all. Awesome. Eric, thanks so much. Appreciate it. This has been absolutely incredible. I'm going to go share this absolutely everywhere after the show. We got to talk too after the show about, I would love to build this right into Investor. So we got to talk after the show about this, but this has been absolutely incredible. Thanks so much for coming on the show. And we got to have you back in 6 months if you're interested.
Yeah, for sure, man. Love to.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
All right.
See you. Take care.
Guys, thanks for joining us on the live show tonight. If you're on Facebook, make sure to join our Facebook group. It's facebook.com/dealmakernation. Tons of great content in that group, tons of great people. Make sure you're joining the community, join the network, and learning from other like-minded entrepreneurs. Also on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel. You can find it at youtube.com/dealmakernation.